In his book Ordinary Men, Christopher Browning tells the story of Reserve Police Battalion 101, a Nazi paramilitary unit active during World War II. Between July 1942 and November 1943, Battalion 101 terrorized and massacred 83,000 Jewish men, women and children. Understandably, our gut reaction is to assume that those who joined the Nazi Party were a fundamentally different type of human being. Browning argued members of Battalion 101 were ordinary human beings, once children just like us, went to school just like us, and dealt with hardships and loss just like us. Browning highlights that members of Battalion 101 were given the choice of opting out of the massacres. If they were not forced to, why did they continue to kill innocent civilians? Browning argued that the officers of Unit 101 killed partly due to obedience, concluding that deference to authority is a deeply ingrained behavioural tendency. He maintained that this tendency could lead us to obey authority figures to the point of performing horrific actions like those seen in World War II. Browning's arguments were in part supported by the research of Stanley Milgram. Milgram wanted to understand why apparently ordinary human beings willingly obeyed orders to kill innocent people during World War II. Milgram's study consisted of 3 roles: an experimenter, a teacher, and a learner. The study was fixed so that the participants were always assigned the role of teacher, while the learner was an actor working with the experimenter. The teacher was instructed to administer electrical shocks to the learner for each mistake made in a basic word game, increasing in intensity to the point where it was clear through the actor's reactions that harm was being done. When the teacher hesitated, the experimenter demanded he continue administering shocks. Before conducting his study, Milgram's colleagues predicted an obedience rate of less than 2%. No way would someone willingly harm another. 65% of participants obeyed the experimenter through to the end. These results shook the world, garnering both positive and negative attention. Milgram's original sample were all white males from a largely westernized society, leading authors to question whether his sample was biased. It was not immediately clear that these findings would generalize to a more diverse population of both male and females with different cultural backgrounds. Since then, the obedience study has been replicated multiple times in different countries and cultures, suggesting that culture does not play as strong a role as first thought. In contrast, Smith et al. Reckons that most of these additional countries were largely westernized, advising caution in assuming a universal trait had been identified. Although gender differences do surface on occasion in obedience research, Thomas Blass found no evidence of gender difference in 8 out of the 9 replications of Milgram's studies he reviewed. In explaining his study's results, Milgram put more weight on the immediate situation, the pressure of authority, rather than on the individual. Many authors have challenged this so-called situationalist perspective, placing more of an emphasis on the individual disposition than Milgram and his colleagues did throughout the years. Researchers have explored this intersection of personality and obedience using the 5-factor model, which helps to account for individual personality differences. A recent example of this comes from Baig et al., who show participants that ranked high in traits, conscientiousness, and agreeableness administered the highest intensity of shocks, suggesting certain personality traits do correlate to increased obedience. They included that strong situation-based determinants of behavior can be overpowered by an individual's disposition. In the wake of Milgram's research, many ethical concerns have been raised. Authors have argued that the psychological stress inflicted on participants cannot be justified. On the other hand, Milgram's follow-ups showed that despite their initial distress, participants were in some cases not only happy to have participated, but actively sought out further involvement. Milgram hit at a stark truth when responding to his critics, stating, "Misinformation is employed in the experiment. Illusion is used when necessary in order to set the stage for the revelation of certain difficult-to-get-at truths." Highlighting his shift from individual to agent, Milgram's participants had to choose between being good in the sense of not harming others or being good in the sense of doing what they were told. Most of us spend the first 20 or so years of our lives obeying authority figures. Milgram's obedience experiments suggest that this tendency becomes deeply ingrained, and if it is left unchecked may lead to the atrocities like those seen in World War II. Most of us here today not only detest Reserve Police Battalion 101, but see ourselves as incapable of carrying out those same actions. Milgram's research is so enduring in part because it calls us to question what we would do were we caught in those situations. His work sheds light on humanity's capacity for evil, in turn helping us to understand ourselves both individually and collectively.